Okay, welcome to tonight's Zoom meeting. Tonight we're going to be talking about the elements of fiction in terms of the stories that we had assigned for today. And by talking about these and discussing them, it teaches you how to apply the skills that these writers have done to your own writing. One of the things that I recommend, the very first thing, and you're going to remember this, get something on the frigging paper. Get something on the paper. I wouldn't worry too much about how I'm using the elements of fiction. Just tell a story. Tell a story, okay? And know the rule before you break it. So that every rule is meant to be broken. But if you're a beginning writer and you repeatedly break an error and you don't know what you're doing, it becomes really obvious. Then usually what I do is on the second draft, I'll usually try to figure out what's my theme here. Remember, a good short story evolves. It's like the little boy that's drawing the drawing, and his mother says, "What are you drawing?" And he says, "I don't know, I'm not finished yet," right? So a good short story is going to evolve, and sometimes you're not going to know. I wrote a short story once about a couple that was going to get a divorce, and it was from the woman's point of view, and her lawyer had told her, just say yes to every question I asked. Well, the whole time I was writing that story, I had it in her friends were throwing her a big divorce party. And the whole time I was writing the story, I had it in my hand that at the very end she was going to say, "No, I don't want the divorce." So she meets her husband at the elevator, and there's this awkward silence. And you can still tell that he doesn't want the divorce at all. He doesn't. And then she doesn't want it either. Something just, she grows to not wanting it. So, but then as I was writing the story, it wasn't her character. The story wasn't developing right for her to say, "No, I don't want the divorce." It seemed like a much better story for her to go ahead and do it, because good literature raises questions.
Yeah.
And then it raised the question, why did she say yes? Why did she say yes when she didn't want the divorce? And then she's just sick when she leaves that courthouse. So I thought it ended up being a much stronger story. So your story may change as you're writing it. But what I usually do is after I write my first draft, I try to figure out what is my theme. And then I go back and try to hone in on that theme. Now, what you don't want to do is beat us over the head with it, okay? But try to figure out what's your theme. Like in that story, I went back and gave just a few little hints to let the reader know that she was still in love with her husband. But I was very subtle with it, very subtle. Give your reader a lot of intelligence. Think of your peers as being your audience, okay? So what I thought we would do, I thought it was interesting because I swear I did not do this intentionally, but it was interesting. I thought that, for example, the one that I had picked for characterization had his name in the title, Tandolfo the Great. And I thought, how interesting. And then the two that I had picked for setting, they were named by the setting, Indian Camp and A&P.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, I didn't do that on purpose. And I thought, how interesting. Everyday use, I thought that one I was going to talk about, I thought theme. All of the stories have all of the elements. Y'all are clear on that, right? But some of them just lend themselves. Some people say they like to divide fiction up into two categories, either character-driven or plot-driven. And literary fiction is more character-driven, the kind of fiction that doesn't sell, that's more art, versus commercial fiction is more plot-driven, the sort of Dan Brown, we're not going to be reading that in here. We're artists. And so that's more the literary, but it's usually more character-driven, where the commercial fiction is usually more plot-driven. The story that I thought lended itself most to plot was White Angel. Magic Words was a very difficult story. I'm thinking about taking it off for next week, but I wanted to get you guys' opinion on it. I felt like it went, as far as using it in terms for a fiction writing class, I mean, it goes all over the place in terms of point of view. It's got about 3 or 4 stories going on at once. It's a very difficult story, I think, and I'm a pretty well-read reader. What do y'all think about that story?
I kind of like the complexity of it.
Yeah, the complexity of it, it makes it for a good read. Yeah. What would you say the theme of that story was?
I'm not gonna lie, I have yet to get to that story so far. I'm kind of behind my reading.
Thank you for admitting it. Thank you.
I'm just a really slow reader, so.
That's okay. That story takes a long time. Now, it's interesting that it's taken us a while to come up with the theme, because I think really good literature, it's like if you go to a really good movie and your friend says, what was it about? That's a hard question to answer, because it's about life and death and love and everything in between. Whereas movies that aren't so good are kind of easy to explain what they're about. Or fiction. But what do some of y'all think the theme of that was? Magic words.
That one's in the Kudos book.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't have that one. I
didn't
didn't get to it, but I will read it as soon as I get it.
Okay.
I need to read all of them, because each one of them does have like these special elements that the other one doesn't have.
Well, you can Google them and probably find them somewhere.
Okay.
But yeah, they all have these special elements.
Yeah, they're all so different. I just took a class with Professor Colquitt.
Yeah.
And she had us read a lot of the Adora Welty.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, these are different, you know, from the ones we went over in your class.
Compared to like Flannery O'Connor.
Yeah.
You know, because
I still like Flannery O'Connor more.
Yeah.
I think it's because I read her first, and she's
Yeah.
my favorite. She's my favorite.
So here's my one brilliant insight I have, and I only have about one a week, and y'all get it. So A and P, it starts out, in walks three girls. So we're brought into that setting. We're brought into it. In walks three girls. And then at the very end, he leaves. And so we leave that setting. Indian camp, same thing. Nick and his father come to that camp, and at the end, they leave that setting. Indian camp, I think, is a perfect example for setting, because that couldn't happen anywhere else.
No.
What's his father going to say? Hey, come along with me and let's go watch a mother have a baby. Or
Is he around like 10 years old, 11? Do you know?
I'm thinking like 10 or 11. That's
part. He's like the Nick Adams, right?
Yes.
The younger version of the. Okay.
Yes. In fact, there's a whole collection called the Nick Adams stories, and that would be called a short story cycle. Okay. Good catch on that.
Yeah, because I was like, this sounds just like, you know, like his character, even as a child. It was.
Yeah.
Like, was it Big Two-Hearted River?
Yes.
Very much like that. Yeah.
You can tell it's the same person, can't you?
Yeah, because he's like very he's thoughtful and like this, like, I don't know, like super depressing way. But now that you read about his childhood, you understand why he's like that. As not older.
I like what you said. He's thoughtful in this sort of
melancholy.
He contemplates.
Yeah, for a child. Yeah, because his other characters and the other short stories, they're very like, they're different, you know.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting story in that it really is about life and death. It's got, you know.
I have to close my door before my kids come in here.
And also, for these meetings, y'all don't worry about things like that. You've had my class before, Miriam. I'm super.
Yeah.
I did kind of clean up my space back here because I didn't want it to distract you guys. Everyday use. Did we do that one in the short story class, Miriam? I couldn't remember. I don't think we did we?
Everyday use. Was that this?
It's in the Norton.
I think we did.
Did we? I'll tell you why I chose everyday use. Everyday use is just a good all-around story.
Yeah.
Not at all. You know, just the way that she develops those characters, the way that it talks about your heritage, the way that she doesn't beat you over the head with it, where clearly the point of that story is that the girl who comes back home isn't really wanting her heritage at all, but the one who has stayed at home does.
Yeah.
So you just put them to everyday use, but she really is celebrating her heritage. She's learning the craft of quilting And the other one's just doing it like people do nowadays on Facebook.
Yeah, she's already moved on, you know?
Yeah, well,
She's like outgrown the stuff that, well, because she left, you know, so.
yeah, but she's taking all these classes on African American heritage, and it was like this book my friend gave me on, and the chef had all this stuff in these glasses, and he was talking about being Southern, and I thought, you can just tell that's fake. It's like one of my favorite short stories starts, in walks my professor, and you can tell it took him 45 minutes to get that. I just threw myself together, look.
Yeah.
And he said, boy, Laurie, that's brilliant that you were able to figure out that that's fake. And I go, yeah, because I'm the real thing. I don't have to fake this accent. You know, I really did go to, we couldn't even afford to go to market. We picked them out of our own backyard. That's how fresh our food was.
Well, it kind of reminded me of the three, Lily Dawn, the three ladies. You know how the one sister comes back and then you have that conflict with the two sisters?
Yes.
And she hasn't really changed, but she acts like she's changed, you know?
Yes,
that one?
yes.
Yeah, so it reminds me of that one.
Okay, let's talk about, and I thought Tandolfo was a great one for character because it sits there and tells you so much about him. Flat out. I'm this, I'm that. I don't know if y'all noticed that or not.
Is that an approach that, like, for our own short stories, would that be too much?
You know, I can't, unfortunately, you just read and you read the book and there's three things to making a good short story. Voice, voice, voice. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, don't tell the administration or I'll get fired. You can't teach that. Mm. But I think, here again, get something on the paper and then edit it. What I usually do is I start with an idea. Usually someone once asked Raymond Carver, are your stories true? And he said, all of my stories are true, but none of them are. Mm-hmm. So you take some form of truth as you know it. There's no such thing as truth. But you take some sort of truth as you know it, maybe an experience you had, mm-hmm. and you build from that, you know, and you're always story hunting as a short story writer. Now, I think part of being a good short story writer is the same thing as being a good photographer. Perhaps it's not so much knowing the elements, but it's knowing what to tell a story about.
Yeah, it is difficult because I kind of like brainstorming different ideas, and some of them sound really great in my head, and then when they come out, I'm like, there's no conflict or internal conflict in that.
Yeah.
No resolution. Like, I don't want the character to just like walk out, you know?
Oh, well, it's sort of like the idea, oh, should I have an abortion or not? Oh, I fell down the stairs. Mm.
Yeah.
You know, should I get married or not? Oh, my fiance died. You know, no, that's not going to cut it. One of the things you can do, Miriam, is or all of you, ask yourself, what does my character want and why can't they have it? Or any of the people on the board that went and wrote that they were taking screenwriting or in film classes? Any of you guys?
Yes, I took cheesy horror films with James.
Okay. Studying film, script writing and studying film is very helpful because film is very plot oriented. And it's very rule oriented in terms of within 15 minutes, this has to happen. Within so many minutes, this has to happen. It's formulaic. So if you have a background in film, it'll help you a lot. But the thing that I would ask is, what does my character want and why can't they have it? Now, the more complex your story is, the more difficult and less tangible that answer is. The cheesy stories have easy answers to that, right?
Yes.
But the more difficult questions aren't really tangible. You know, like Tandolfo. It's not real clear. I mean, they don't beat you over the head with it, but I just love that story because I think that all of that is built together is just it's grief, just a man in grief, and he just doesn't know what to do with himself type thing. I
had a question about dialogue. So We can talk about it now, or if you're
Go
gonna.
ahead. No,
okay.
no.
So the taglines, sometimes they just go from one person speaking to another. If there's only like two people in that room, like in the story you had us retype.
Yeah.
Do you like it to say like he said, she said?
Wait. It doesn't matter what I like. It matters what the rules of fiction dictate. So go ahead.
Okay. So is there like a?
There is, and that's all in the Cardos.
Okay.
Every time there's a new speaker, there's a new paragraph. Except you can have the narrator and one speaker if you're saying, she was outside planting plants. It was very hot.
Yeah.
Damn, I shouldn't have bought so many plants, she said. All that can go in one paragraph because it's her movements, it's her actions. Now, it might be a little bit more questionable if it was, she was in the garden working, it was hot, it was starting to rain. Aren't you tired, he said? In that case, I might put the dialogue in the next paragraph, and who wants to guess why?
It's just a new voice. So
It's a new person, yeah.
Yeah, there was
It's
a
not doing the action.
Cardos. There was actually a great example of that. I had to read it like 4 times because I was really confused on what happened.
Yeah. You don't want to confuse your reader, but just leave your dialogue tags to he said and she said. You don't need
okay, yeah. I was like, that's what I.
Yeah.
Okay.
Damn it! Don't quit looking at my wife like that. You don't need to say, he shouted.
Okay.
Let me give you a rule. Do not depend on punctuation as a crutch to do what your big girl and boy words need to be doing. And you're going to hear me say this, and I don't mean it condescending, but use your big girl and boy words.
Okay.
You don't need do not depend on punctuation to do what you need to be doing with your words.
Okay. Also with the titles, I don't know how acceptable it is. You know how like the title, the story, what we talk about when we talk about love?
Yeah.
If we have a similar type story, is it bad to say like, to use some of that title, like what we talk about when we talk about marriage instead?
No, because people will know that it's an homage to Raymond Carver.
So you can?
Yes.
Okay, because, yeah, I really love that story. And then I noticed that I don't know if it's a cultural thing, but when we get together with couples, it's always about marriage. It's never about love.
That's
It's
interesting.
weird. Yeah, so I was like, oh, I just sitting there after reading that story a while from the first class, I was like, oh yeah, but what we talk about is marriage. It's not love. Like
That's a good point. Yeah. So everybody would know that it's an homage to Raymond Carver.
Okay. Good.
And that's fine. Let me ask you this. Almost every time you ask me something, I'm going to say yes. As long as you know the rule, you can break it. But what I'm thinking is, yes, if you're good enough. You can get away with anything.
Yeah.
Sometimes I pop off and say it. If you're good enough, can I write a 2-page story? If you're good enough.
Yeah, I don't know if I can write like Raymond Carver quite yet.
I doubt it. If you do, you don't need this class. Raymond Carver, interesting you said that, because he had what I'm going to, well, if this were a brick and mortar class, I would say many times, what I call the illusion of spontaneity.
Mm.
He makes it look real easy.
Yeah, but
when you know you've got a good artist.
Yeah.
They make it look really easy, and you think, oh, I can do this.
Oh, that's so hard.
Writing is very difficult.
Yeah.
But here again, you don't just say, dialogue tags are not meant to be noticed. You don't really want your reader paying attention to them, so just a gentle, but make sure you get the comma and the quotes and all that right, or I'm going to count off a lot for that. I've pretty much guaranteed you a B if you have some sort of conflict and the mechanics are in line. But probably 40% of the class will mess up the dialogue tags really bad the first time. Pay attention to how it's done. Pay attention.
Well, I started writing a little bit, and that was the hardest part.
Well, the reason that I had you type that story up was so you could see the mechanics.
Well, I think like when you read, you don't pay attention to the dialogue tags, but when you write, there's so much attention to the dialogue tags when you're writing it, actually.
Right.
So it was a little like trippy.
Right. So that's why I think typing up that story will help y'all a lot because it forced you to look at it.
Yeah.
Now, what you want to do is you want to start reading things from a writer's point of view. And you want to start asking yourself, how did he or she do that? So I want to hear from y'all. Those are just what I picked out. What would some of y'all pick out for point of view? I wouldn't try to go head hopping in this class. I would stick with one point of view.
No head hopping.
And also, you're not allowed to use those little asterisks or, well, you're allowed to, but I wouldn't because that's another crutch that people use. People need to use transitions. I mean, people do it all the time. They do every one of these all the time. But I wouldn't get into that habit early in my writing career. I would break it and make myself use transitions. It was years later before she realized or something. What would y'all call some of the ones that were strong in some of the areas? The ones I had written down were theme, plot, characterization. Y'all want me to go a little slower so y'all can write them down?
Well, White Angel was really descriptive.
Oh, I love that story. Wasn't it good?
You couldn't put it anywhere else. The setting was very unique to like the characters and their lifestyle and everything.
That's part of he wrote a whole novel. I read it. I just read it. I can't remember the title of it though. Theme, plot, characterization, setting, point of view. Point of view is important. I would usually beginning writers write in the past tense, third person, limited. But the choices are first person, third person, omniscient, limited omniscient, second person. You have tone, structure, and style. So what do y'all think about some of these in terms of what categories might y'all say? What had a weak? Hemingway has a very sparse. Carver and Hemingway are both in the minimalist tradition, very sparse, very they don't give you much information. You know, it's very pared down. That would be under style.
Yeah, I noticed that with Hemingway's stuff. His style is very direct, I guess. The characters tend to be a little bit on the flatter side, but still have that kind of depth to them.
Yes.
Mainly, it's not shown necessarily through personality, but through their actions, through their voices.
Yes. Good observation. Very good. Yes.
Sure.
Well, what's interesting about that story, too, is that of Indian Camp, Nick leaves a completely different person than when he came. He changes.
Yeah,
you probably want one of your characters to change, but don't beat us over the head with this, and don't tell us. Show, don't tell.
Well, yeah, and when the husband in the Indian camp killed himself, it's left. Some things are just left in the air for you to.
Yeah.
Fully, and he kind of asks like later, like, "Where's my uncle?" And it's like, okay, now that character's gone. There's not. He kind of leaves a lot for the imagination.
Yeah, yeah. You got to fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
And I've always argued. I think I've already said this, but good literature raises questions. It doesn't answer them. It took me years to figure out a definition of good literature, and that's the one I finally came. My friend wrote a novel, and he said, Do you think it answers the question? And I said, I hope not, because if it does, it wasn't a very good question. Because good, questions with easy answers aren't really worth asking.
There's a chapter in I don't know, the Making the Simple Fiction.
Yeah.
Sacred Fiction.
Don't you love that? How you
He has great examples. That's what I love.
Yes.
There was a chapter about what last lines not to use.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
I read them out loud to my husband. I was like, well, yeah, duh. But you don't notice that till someone goes, this is too cheesy to be the last line.
yes.
Yeah.
And the twisted endings is way out of style. We see it coming and we feel cheated.
Yeah, that's true.
So avoid those. Avoid the twisted endings. Avoid. I don't want to just sit here and give you a litany of rules because that's what Cardos is for.
Even
That
that
book
is
is packed. It's packed. You got to really read it twice almost. I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
I was saying, even then, like, if I remember, I think it's with Cardos, he even says in his thing, like, these are all these rules I'm saying, but feel free to break them.
Yeah, but know the rule before you break it.
Yeah. Oh.
If you do anything well, you know that. Know the rule before you break it. Like before I became a pretty good seamstress, I just went right by the pattern because I was afraid not to. Now the pattern is literally just a template guideline for me. Now I don't even use a pattern half the time.
What about like language itself? You know how when you read like Zora Neale Hurston's stuff, she has the dialect of that like specific,
Right.
like Eatonville, Florida thing going on. Is that something that is still done?
No.
No.
Good question. Someone once told me that you can tell that all my characters are from small Texas towns. And you don't spell it out like that. The way you do it is through syntax. Like I'm fixing to go to the store.
Okay.
She done had her breakfast.
Okay, so
You do it through the way that you arrange the words, not through this,
the dialect.
not through, yeah. If an editor was to get a short story with the first page had a bunch of dialect, it'd go right in the reject pile because that tells them you don't know what you're doing. Good question.
She does it really good.
Yeah, but people just don't do it anymore.
Yeah. Okay.
People will read it like that. They'll read it.
I really liked this book.
What?
I really like this book. It's so easy to read.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
You get some good, valuable advice out of it.
Yes, there was a part where he mentions observing people and like keeping a journal. I really liked that part. I was like, I might do that.
Yeah. You know, being a writer, you're working all the time. It's how you view the world. Here again, it's like being a photographer. You can buy all these lenses and know how to use them and all of this, but what do you take a picture of?
I've been reading like a lot of sci-fi and fantasy. I just had to stop because I was like, this is not helping me right now.
No.
Not with this class. I have to like get back down to earth.
Literally.
To come back down.
Well, did you read about pitfalls of writing that kind of,
Yeah.
I hate putting limits on y'all, but I had to.
Well,
Last semester I didn't do that, and about half the class wrote that. It was just.
I think it's good.
They try to get you by shock value. Oh, yeah, don't try to shock us. Oh, he committed suicide. Oh, he's gay. Well, so he's gay. Big deal. You know.
Yeah.
Don't try to shock us.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, a lot of good fiction, it has to do with what happened after an event. And then the conflict arises. Usually I say no dead grandmother stories because you got to make us care about the character. And that's very hard to do. Death is very hard to write about it. And grief. But the reason that I kind of guarantee you that B, I don't want that. Here's what I don't want. I don't want y'all sitting there with this great story to tell, worried about a grade and worried about all these rules. And I don't want to stifle your artistic involvement, okay? So that's why I didn't want the grade. I thought I was more than fair with the grade deal. Didn't y'all? I thought that was really fair.
Mm-hmm.
But 10, 20 typos on the first page, just quit reading it. I'm going to. I'm going to put F on it and quit reading it. And y'all all understand, well, you'll see when you get the stories up how you'll go. I'm going to put them in sets probably in the next day or two. But everybody kind of understands how to do that. You'll go down, well, you'll figure it out. I haven't been getting a lot of tech questions. I don't do the tech part of this class. I just teach.
So this is the one we're turning in is like the final draft. That's it. The one.
Yeah, there are no rewrites.
Okay, there's no rough drafts or anything like that.
There was last semester, and that was a fiasco. I learned so much last time.
It didn't work out?
No.
Oh.
No. People didn't take rough drafts seriously. It's a nightmare.
Okay.
I learned so much. I pretty much rebuilt this whole class. By next time, I'll have it really down. Okay, so I want to hear from y'all. What did y'all think about putting some of these in the different strengths and weaknesses? It's interesting too because I think the richer the story is, the more difficult it is to say what the conflict is. Like White Angel, you know.
Well, yeah.
I was proud of my little insight about Indian Camp and A&P. I'm going to keep them for next time.
Yeah.
One thing that I think it was you that said it. One thing that I've been formulating my short story about is that the story written isn't necessarily what it's about. Like what happened in the story isn't what it's about, and that really actually really helped me with like the hills are hills like white elephants. It's like they don't mention any of what is actually going on in the story. It's all visualized, and that's something on how I've been using to formulate what I plan on writing down.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that helped you. That's one of the things that the older I get and the more experience I have teaching, the more I realize how valuable experience is, because just experience has taught me to tell students that. It's not a good story about planting, about gardening is not about gardening.
Yeah, it actually really helped me draw from kind of things that happened to me when I was a kid, like just daily events that I can apply and write something else about.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Now, it'll be about that on the surface. Yeah. Miriam, you're logged in twice. I don't care. I'm just letting you know. I don't care, but log in through the SDSU one next time.
Yeah, I did. I was on Blackboard.
Oh, you did? Okay, yeah. Through Blackboard, I mean. Yeah, so try to think, I guess, hold on a minute, y'all. Oh, here, I've got my ankles bleeding. What category would y'all, or what do y'all think about some of these? Like, A and P also could be a great characterization about Sammy. You know, he wants to be like this big hero, but it sort of backfires on him.
Yeah,
I do like how he still feels kind of victorious until he walks out the door, and it kind of has that moment of, oh.
Yeah. Whoops. Yeah. I like it. That's so well done. So well done. Of course, that's John Updike. He's a master of the short story. What were some of your just stories that you either learned something from or
It was in any of these books. It was in a previous class. Actually, I think it might be in this one. It was like a how would I describe it? It's the voices and how the characters talk the language. It was so difficult to read, and
The book?
I can't remember. I know the setting was, it was in like post Civil War, Black community in the South, and it was like between. They just had that really heavy dialect and
Yeah,
slang.
that makes it so hard to read.
Was it Haircut? Haircut was.
No. What are you talking about? A short story or a novel?
No, it was a short story.
It's done by everyday use.
You talking about One for Today?
Maybe.
That would have been. Oh no, we didn't have One for Today, but the Zornell Hurston.
Yeah, she was really heavy dialogue.
It's hard for me to read.
Yeah.
But once you get into it, it gets. But avoid that at all costs. Is everybody clear on that? Avoid that. You do it through. He's fixing to go to the store. He's.
I mean, there's some of that's the dialect.
Kind of reminds me of another book that I read before. Not sure if anyone else can see this, but it's called like For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. And it has a similar thing where it uses a very heavy Black dialect in it.
Mhm.
That surprises me. What year was it published?
Shoot, can't remember where to find that.
The copyright first should be on the title
Right.
page.
Yeah, it's a experimental choreo poem.
It's what?
It looks like 1975, 76.
Oh, okay. It's an experimental poem. Is that what
Yeah.
this?
It's a choreo poem, so it's performative.
Okay, that makes sense. Hold on a minute. Go ahead and keep talking. I can hear y'all.
But yeah, I noticed that too. It's very interesting when authors sort of incorporate that dialect into it.
You can use a little bit, one or two words, but it's too hard for us to read. And it's just something that we don't do anymore. So any editor is going to throw it out the door.
I took an.
But here again, if you're good enough, you can do anything.
I took an African lit class, comparative lit, and none of the authors did that in any.
Yeah, you just don't do it. I mean, every one of my characters are small, redneck hillbillies like me. And every one of them talk like me, but I do not spell it out like that. And you know they do.
See, that's this story. The short story I was talking about. It was spelled out in that, and it really.
That would drive me nuts. Where they like have apostrophe and leave the G off.
Yeah, and like yeah, it was. I really want to find it because it was.
What book is that? Let me see the book you've got.
Creating fiction.
Have you taken a fiction writing class before?
Yeah, I took it at my community college.
Read the titles of some of the stories in there. I'll know it.
Let me look. Well, there's A and P is definitely here.
Well, wasn't that?
There's a whole bunch of these in here.
Okay, well, don't worry about it. Don't let your head get clogged up with it. Just move on. There's a bunch of stories like
I
that.
don't want to reread it because it was that.
Yeah, don't wait. Look, I picked out stories. I spent a lot of time on this class.
Mhm.
I didn't want y'all to have to buy that expensive Norton book. And so I picked out stories that I thought would really help you with your writing. Okay? I want to hear something from y'all, though. I'm tired of
Can I ask
talking.
you another question? Just,
Yeah. You can
So
ask-
you know the things they carried, the Tim
Yes.
O'Brien.
yes.
You know how is it considered a short story or an essay?
A short story.
It is? Okay.
Well, it's part of a whole collection of things they carried, and some people call it a novel, but I would call it a short story cycle.
Short story cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That was one of my favorites.
But I did my whole dissertation on how you put things into different genres, and you know what the answer is at the end of the day? Whatever an editor says it is. So if it's in a collection of short stories, it's a short story. So
Okay.
there's a fine line between a personal essay and a short story.
Okay.
But that could be an essay, yes, a personal essay. Or a creative nonfiction.
I guess thinking about my own writing and looking at some of this stuff here, I tend to write longer stories like novels, and I tend to go pretty long with my short stories too when I do write them. And one of the things I think is I tend to get really deep into detail and going into descriptions and stuff. So it was nice reading some of these shorter stories where things are very direct, very quick.
Yeah.
And I'm still like having to read through some of these to really get an understanding of what they're focusing on, what their ideas are, and how to get these ideas across very quickly without seeming too rushed or without dropping things in the process.
Yeah, without info dumping. Have you read the article on info dump?
Right,
It's in under the course readings, but I used to have that problem where I couldn't get my characters in and out of rooms. So I'd be like, she took one step, she moved one foot.
So hard.
I could see them moving, but I could not get them out of the room, you know.
It's so hard once you start, because I don't write, so I just read and I do essays, you know. And then I was like, this is so hard. How do you go from that room to the car to the apartment?
I know.
How do they get to the apartment and into the kitchen and onto the couch? And like, it's so much harder.
People in my group used to kid me. They were going to say, well, Laurie, aren't you going to tell us she took a breath? You know. Yeah. Well, there's one thing you can do is as you're reading, start writing ways down that authors do this. Start writing it down. Things like the carpet felt rough on her toes when she got to the living room.
Mm.
You know, and start paying attention to how they do it. You know, or she still couldn't believe she decided to paint that wall yellow.
So hard.
Yeah, it is. It is. Now, my professor taught me just cut to the chase. 10 years later.
Oh, okay.
Now, here's an example. 10 years later, her father bought her a bicycle for her birthday.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit smoother way would be her father bought her a bicycle for her 10th birthday.
That's for her 10th birthday. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But here again, start being a writerly reader. Start looking at how did they do that?
How did they do that?
The ways that they remind us they're still in their head, you know, like she could still remember, or just start watching for the way they do it. And start figuring out what your weaknesses are and getting rid of them early in your career. Do y'all have any ideas about your story you want to run by? Nobody's posting on the...
I'm writing about my in-laws.
What?
I'm going to write about my in-laws.
Uh-huh.
There are no better characters in my head.
That's so funny. Yeah.
Like characters that are actual characters, and you're just like, you're just different, you know, and people have to read this about you. I'll change the names, but still, yeah, they're pretty obvious. It'll be like a lot easier for me because I've had so much experience with conflict, you know. So I was like, I'll just do like a normal Sunday lunch. So that would be reader because you get to hear some.
Do they live here in San Diego?
Yeah.
Oh, God, so funny.
Yeah, I have a couple ideas for stories I'm gonna be playing around with.
Yeah. Do you want to run any of them by us, or?
I guess the one I'm looking at right now, the idea I'm going for with is this guy, lead character is making repairs on someone's home and keeps coming back to his own home that's continuously falling further into disrepair.
Oh, that's
Okay.
interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah. And so the inner themes could be like his life's falling apart. I don't know, something like yeah. That sounds interesting, yeah. And it's so true. Yeah, I like this idea of just a Sunday dinner.
Yeah, because those are the most interesting.
Mhm.
I don't know. Because I think it's like, I love when one culture meets like another, or when
Yeah.
frame of mind meets like, and you're just like, how is this important to you still? Like what,
Yeah.
you know, because I come from, I mean, I was raised and born here, but you know, all the adults that I deal with are a completely different generation from a different country. So there's always conflict about, you know, respect and ideas and what you should say and what you shouldn't be saying and what you around them, you know. So
Yeah.
it can be so frustrating just to sit quietly, you know.
And throw a little bit of feminist in there and you've really got, right?
You know, yeah, like my father-in-law, for example, just will say stuff and then I have to like look over at my husband and he's like,
Yeah.
don't say anything.
Yeah, just
let him talk.
yeah. You're not going to change his mind.
Yeah. So that's what I'm going to go with. Because I read in that book, like, write what you know, you know?
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, that would be the best place for me to start, you know, because I don't write at all. So,
Yeah, let me give you some advice too. My daughter and I wrote this circus novel. I think I was talking about it, about elephant abuse, but I did 3 years of research on the American circus, and I know way too much about it. And she goes, well, Mom, I just can't believe we're going to do this and we're going to lose all that research. And I said, no, we're not. It's going to be in the white space. Because Hemingway said it best. You can't, if you've never been bass fishing, you might not use bass fishing in the story, the elements of it, but you better know how to do it. It's in the white space of the story. You following me?
It's like that, like grit writing we were talking about in your short story class.
Yeah.
Who was it who never really experienced that but wrote about it? And
oh yeah, who was it? Yeah.
I don't know if it was like Steinbeck or someone, and it made a lot of sense because, you know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was.
Really upset I can't find that story.
You're like me. I can't stand it when I can't find something. I can't stand it.
Probably when the semester's over.
Yeah.
That's
What
usually-
was the? Who were we talking about?
We were talking about like the Grapes of Wrath, and we were talking about those photographs that they used to take.
Yeah.
Not share the black and whites of
Yeah.
the workers. Yeah, and then I can't remember who the author was.
I edited a book on gambling once, and boy, you could tell that these real stories kind of happened. But this lady had a scene where these people were at a crap table. Well, it was obvious she didn't know how to play craps. So I kept having to rewrite it, and she kept screwing it up. So finally, I just rewrote it for her because
You have to know.
she just didn't, and it was too difficult. Craps is a complicated game, and I'm like, let me just rewrite it. But
Should have invited her to a game.
what?
Should have invited to our game.
Yeah, I should have. But it was in the. It's got there. She was making mistakes in the white space. You following me? Like everywhere in that elephant book, there's going to be stuff about the circus in the white space.
There's actually a new documentary on Netflix about the circus. I actually thought about you when it popped up on my feed.
Oh, really?
Yes, I was like, oh, this looks so interesting. I want to watch it.
God, I know from the beginnings to just way too much, but it's all in that white space. So avoid things that you've never done because you will make mistakes.
Yeah, it's already hard enough writing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's already hard enough writing about what you do now.
Yeah, there
I
you go.
wouldn't want to take on the challenge of trying to figure out something I've never done. You know?
Right.
I like it's just like I think it's good that you cut out all the other stuff because it narrows, your
Yeah.
view, because you have to, it forces you to think about the everyday things that are important.
Exactly. And that's exactly why I cut it out. I don't want you to depend on horror and shock and an exclamation point.
Yeah, that's definitely.
Plus, I don't want to have to read 30 stories about.
Yeah.
I just don't. Although it's not about me, this is my job. I get paid for it. And it's very hard to critique because these kind of rules don't apply.
Yeah.
And it's just dangerous for beginning writers because it's a way of getting around saying something profound.
Mm-hmm.
They think it's profound because they've created this they're so creative by this little monster they've created and artsy fartsy. No, I want to know how somebody changed their point of view just by hearing the car door slam differently.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's so hard writing about like everyday stuff. I never thought it would be so hard. Yeah. It gets like, you know, like stressed out too. And I'm just like, oh my God, what if they read this on accident somehow?
You know, try not to focus too much on that.
Yeah. Because you're trying to be, I noticed I was like trying to be nice about it. And then I was like, hey, you can't be nice about it.
No. I needed to tell, I think I made that clear. We're not the San Diego cheerleaders. We're here to point out what's wrong with the story. And I tend to be very blunt.
Yeah.
People will ask me, will you read my story? And I said, only if you really want me to read it, because I'm not going to waste my time and say a bunch of bullshit about a story. I'm going to tell you this. My daughter was taking this creative writing workshop, and the teacher goes, do you have anybody who reads your stories? And she goes, yeah, my mother. Well, he's thinking, he goes, no. And she goes, no, my mother's brutal. We're not talking about the average mother. Oh, your stories, I'm brutal. Does anybody have any questions?
Not yet.
Not yet. All right. So like I said, I wouldn't worry too much about how I use these elements. And I wouldn't even worry about, the main thing is you need to have a setup, a conflict, and a resolution. And who wants what and why can't they have it? If you make the resolution too easy for them, it's not a good story.
Would it, in my story, it's like the character is going through a conflict that he's already gone through, but every single time he still comes up against those conflict barriers, if that makes sense.
The same conflict in a different manifestation type thing?
No, actually in the very same manifestation.
Okay.
The idea was going to go over that, like, I know he knows he's done this before. He's not sure why he's hesitating, he's shaking,
Oh, okay. Okay.
Wasn't sure if that was okay of a conflict.
Yeah, that sounds, yeah, that's a great conflict.
Okay.
Yeah, it's inner conflict.
Yeah, it's like
the very first literature class I ever took, the professor got up and said, there's 4 themes to literature. Man versus man, man versus society. No, man versus man, which is man versus society. Man versus himself, which is inner conflict. Man versus God, and man versus nature. And I went around for years thinking those were the only themes in literature. And then I thought, oh, he's just using some little paradigm.
What about The Stranger Comes to Town? That's my
favorite. Yeah, remember that?
That's one's my favorite.
Stranger comes to town, or somebody leaves and then they're the stranger.
Wish I could find it, but at one point I did see like a big visual representation of showing a whole bunch of those themes.
Oh, that's cool.
Stranger comes to town.
Yeah,
those kind of.
It was mostly like man versus this. That.
Oh, yeah.
It was something I saw a long time ago.
Huh? How interesting.
Especially when you're visual.
Well, Cardos is the guy who wrote that story. He contributed to my they wrote the book, he contributed to my gambling. And he says, the guy's teaching the creative writing class, and he tells them, stranger comes to town or somebody leaves and goes to a new place. And a lot of short stories have stranger comes to town.
Mhm.
AMP could be stranger comes to town.
Yes.
Something different's coming to the AMP.
That's correct.
Now, Indian can't. Somebody's going to a different place.
Yeah, I think we talked. I think it was the man who corrupted Hadleyburg.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those.
Yeah, you had mentioned you like the Cardos book. It's just so rich, full of information, isn't it?
Yes.
I'm glad that are you finding any of it difficult, or is you get through it okay?
I actually like all the little the stops and exercises.
Yeah, y'all can do some of those.
Done them, but when I'm reading, I take a moment and I think about it and how I would approach said.
Yes.
I do like them.
So tomorrow starts the discussion board assignment.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't figured out what discussion topic I'm going to have, but
Nora?
I'll narrow it down.
What about, how we were talking about those endings, where they're just kind of cheesy endings? What would you say about like bullet in the brain? Would you say
That shouldn't work. That story should not work.
But it's so good. It like haunts you.
It does. It works, and it shouldn't work because technically the guy's not even alive when he's narrating the story.
Yeah. So that one kind of I read ahead. I've read that one. And I just reread it because I remember I really liked that one. It always comes back. Because
I think that's a tribute to what is that, Owl Creek, an incident at Owl Creek, or where the guy's about to die and all these thoughts go through his head.
I don't think
an older story. Yeah.
I haven't read that one.
But it works, doesn't it? There's no argument about it.
Yeah, it works really well. But
Tobias Wolff does a lot of rule breaking and gets away with it. He goes into the future tense a lot. He's a great writer.
I don't think I can make that work.
Yeah, I can. I'm not there yet.
No. Well, also like Sunny's Blues, it's very different too.
Yeah.
So,
Sunny's Blues is just a great short story. Oh my God, just
it's very rich with
very rich.
And even though you see it from one point of view, you almost feel like the brother character is just as close to you as the narrator was.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a hard time I only have like a page of what I want already, but I have a hard time making those other characters important.
Yeah. You don't have to necessarily. My rule, usually, you don't want to get, as a beginning writer especially, too many characters.
Yeah.
I try to limit myself to like 3. 3 is just a good number for everything, actually. 3 little bears, 3 wishes, 3's everywhere. Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Keep it.
If you get too many, and they darn sure don't all have to be important in a short story.
Okay.
They can just be the lady who sold me the flowers.
Mm-hmm.
AMP is a good example. Go through that story and underline all the people in that story that aren't really important.
Yeah, there's a lot of.
Well, I hate to say somebody's not important, but they're not relevant to the story.
Yeah.
But they need to be there. I don't know why more people don't attend these.
I think they're really helpful.
Yeah, I
I've been complaining to you guys, and nobody else wants to listen to me, and you guys have to. So
Yeah. Okay, well, does anybody have any last minute questions, comments, or testimonies?
No.
No? All right. Well, thank you guys for attending. I
Yeah.
really, really appreciate it. I really do. We couldn't have the meeting if people didn't come.
I think they're really
All right.
helpful. Thank you for hosting.
Yes, yes, yes. Y'all post something on the discussion board if you have a question about your story or anything.
Okay.
All right. Have a nice evening. Start thinking about your story. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.